Hey guys, welcome back to Tethan Props. Today I've got a bit of a different video for you. I was scrolling through Instagram one day and I came across Jake Bartok and I was really loving his stuff. He does a lot of medieval Star Wars crossovers and I absolutely love how they look. Like there's one of Luke Skywalker right here. Looks fantastic. And I was scrolling through, loving every single one of them, and I saw Anakin, my favorite character from Star Wars. And I saw he had a really cool sword lightsaber crossover and I thought that was right up my alley, so I wanted to find a better picture of it. We scroll down to when he started making these. We go across, there it is. Look at that sword, looks absolutely amazing. So what I did was I got into contact with Jake. He's a fellow Australian here in Melbourne and I wanted to see if he was up for doing a collaboration. So what he did was he sent me some really high detailed photos or drawings of Anakin's sword that he had done. So what I decided I'd do was to make this into a real life sword lightsaber crossover. Just as I've done with my Lord of the Rings ones, I'm going to do it with Anakin's lightsaber. So to start this one off, I had to start off with a 3D model. So let's get to that and I'll show you how I modeled it from scratch. I first wanted to start off with a cylinder to start building the lightsaber around. I know that the internal cord that I use for all my lightsabers is 25mm wide. So I first started off with a 25mm wide circle and then extruded that up to about 30cm, and that was going to be the basis of the height. Next, it was to start working on the pommel. So I made a little hexagon at the bottom of the lightsaber, extruded it out a little bit, and then cut in the corners to give it a little bit of shape. Next, it was time to give it the curve. So I tried a few different ways to do this, and I found that if I pulled out the inner ring, it made a really nice curved shape. And then it was time to just cut it down a little bit and make it a little bit neater. So I accidentally forgot to record a bit of that, but what I did was just did a little bit of work on the handles, but this was just simple circles, extruding them up to a larger shape. So what I'm doing right now is making the top of the handle. So again, just a hexagon shape that I've extruded up to the top of the lightsaber. And I think I went a little bit too high, so I'm cutting it down a little bit. And now I am putting in a little bit of a neck ring on it and just cleaning it up a little bit. So the next thing that I wanted to do was start working on the crossguard that comes out. So I made a plane that was in line with the face of the hexagon that I'm going around the top, and then extruded out a diamond shape. Did the exact same thing on both sides. So I was just checking that the proportions looked good and I'm happy with how it was. So now it was time to start working on the little details that were on the ends of the crossguard. So they were a little bit higher peaked diamonds, extruded those out a little bit, and then use the edging tools to kind of cut it down a little bit and make it a bit of a nicer shape. And I did the exact same thing on both sides. So everything that I was doing and doing it on both sides, I was remembering the measurements that I used. So this section here, I've already done on one side as you can see, but I'm just creating a little bit more shape and details to the crossguard. So from the side on view, I did the shape that I was after, extruded it out across the whole crossguard, and then it was time to clean them up a little bit and give them a little bit of beveling to give a bit of shape. While looking at it, I decided to do a little bit more detail work on the ends of the crossguard. So pulled in them a little bit to give them a bit better shape. And again, everything I do to one side, I've got to go and do the exact same measurements to the other side. When using Fusion 360, it allows you to measure how much you are moving something, so you can go and copy the exact same measurements. So what I did then, and what I'm doing now, is creating the holes in the lightsaber, which then I put my core of the lightsaber in, as well as the housing to hold the lightsaber blade. So I've just hollowed out the internal part of the lightsaber, and now it's time to start working on the Jedi symbol that you see on the top of the lightsaber. So I'm just going around and detailing out the shape. Messed it up the first time, so I just keep trying. So it's a little bit harder to draw out curved shapes like this, but I finally got the hang of it. Went round and did the whole thing. And with shapes like this, you have to always make sure that they line up. And you can see right then when it all flashed blue, that means it was one solid shape. If you don't have a solid shape, you can't actually edit any of the, you can't press pull them, you can't pull them out into shapes or anything like that. You've got to have a closed shape. So what I'm doing now is just, so I don't have to try draw it again, it's just copying it and flipping over the middle axis. So I've extruded it out now, and now I've got to go and repeat on the exact same shape on the other side. So just doing the same process on the other side. And now, just to give it a little bit better shape, I've selected all the external edges and I'm just pulling them in a little bit to give them a curved shape. So at this point I decided to just go do a little bit of cleanup on the handle section. So that's just pulling in the edges to make them curved a little bit more. And on the top of the cross guards, I wanted more of a curved shape to that than the hard edges that there was. So I selected all the edges I need and pulled them in, and the same with underneath the cross guard. So now it was time to put in the holes for the lightsaber button. So I used two holes, one internal one that's 12 millimeters and one external one that's about 16 millimeters. And I do this because the 12 millimeter one will hold the actual button, and the outside one provides a little bit of a hole for you to put your thumb into to turn the lightsaber on. Without it, it's a little bit hard to press the button. So now I'm adding a little bit more detail to the crossguard section. So I'm drawing out a little bit of a triangle section that's around the middle. I'm going to copy it over to both sides, extrude it across, and then clean it up a little bit. So I realized that I didn't go all the way up, which means I am redoing the shapes again, extruded across the whole way, and you can see that I'm blocking off the hole that I made earlier, but that's simple. I can easily just go in and redraw those holes in later. So I wanted to get a little bit of a higher detail on that, so I extruded it up and then curved in the edges and then cleaned up all the corners a little bit. I think it turned out really well. Alrighty, so it's time to put those holes back in, as I said. So just draw out my 30 millimeter hole, extrude it down, and there we go. So I want to do something a little special around the midsection of the handle here. So you see a lot in Star Wars, there's just a lot of grid patterns. So I decided to draw out just random grid patterns, and then I was going to wrap it around the middle bit of the handle, well, the joint between the handle and the top part. So what I did was draw out a random assortment of shapes and then copied them across 3 times. Had to check the distance because I knew the circumference of the middle part of that circle. So I just had to add a little bit more on, check the distance again, and I knew that when I wrapped that around, selecting them all to wrap around, that it would form up perfectly on the middle part of the section. So I didn't want to make it too deep either, but just enough that it shows up the detail, and that looked absolutely great when I wrapped it around. Really happy with how that turned out. So there's the lightsaber complete. I missed the middle section of the handle there, but that is the lightsaber essentially complete. Really happy with how it's turned out. Taking those fairly like really detailed photos but missing the really little intricate things. I was happy that I was able to add those little bit of extra details to make it really stand out. So now it's time to get this into the software that I'm going to use to cut it up and get it ready for 3D printing. So I've transported it into 3D Builder. This is a really good program for cutting models up and getting them ready for 3D printing. So where I'm cutting it now is just above the handle, below the midsection, and I'm cutting it here because that's just how I designed it to print in those big pieces there. So the bottom pommel and handle will be printed as one piece. So the top section here, it's a bit too wide to fit on my 3D printer. So what I'm going to do is cut it up a little bit. So I'm cutting it at the crossguard in a couple sections, and this means I'll be able to print all the pieces separately, glue them together later, and it'll look good still. So there we have it, guys. That is how I 3D modeled Anakin Skywalker's sword. Really happy with how the final model turned out. So the next stage will be getting this ready for 3D printing it and cleaning up the print. So that'll be my next video. Stay tuned for that, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video a lot, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.